New Jersey was supposed to be the safe play. Minutes from Manhattan, commuter rails in every direction, established neighborhoods, and demand that always seemed to refill itself. For years, buyers believed that if they waited too long, prices would simply move farther out of reach. That belief trained people to rush. But something subtle has changed. In 2025, homes across New Jersey aren't collapsing, they're hesitating. Listings linger a little longer. Buyers don't sprint to open houses. Price cuts appear quietly, not as panic, but as adjustment. Nothing looks broken yet, and that's exactly why many people miss what's happening. National averages won't warn you. Headlines still talk about resilience and long-term strength. But housing doesn't move nationally. It moves locally, one street and one building at a time. And in many New Jersey cities, urgency has disappeared before prices have. That's the danger zone. Not when buyers vanish, but when they stop rushing. When they pause. When they calculate the full monthly cost instead of chasing the narrative. This video isn't here to scare you. It's here to sharpen your awareness. Some markets still look fine until you slow down and look closer. Subscribe and hit the bell, not for hype, but to recognize the slowdown before the listings do. Most people misunderstand how housing markets actually break. They expect a moment, a headline, a sudden drop that confirms something has gone wrong. But housing almost never fails that way. It fails quietly, through misalignment, long before prices visibly fall. That's why so many buyers feel blindsided later, even though the signals were there the entire time. The first pressure point is affordability compression. Prices rise faster than incomes, but demand doesn't disappear overnight. Buyers stretch instead. They accept thinner savings, higher payments, and less margin for error. The market keeps moving, not because it's healthy, but because people are overextending. Once rates rise or costs increase even slightly, that fragile demand pulls back all at once. Not dramatically, just decisively. Then comes ownership cost stacking. A mortgage is never the full picture. Property taxes reset higher. Insurance premiums climb, sometimes sharply. HOA fees increase as labor, utilities, and maintenance costs rise. Older buildings face reserve shortfalls and special assessments. Individually, these costs feel manageable. Together, they quietly push the next buyer out of qualification. Listings don't collapse in response. They just stop moving. Inventory absorption is where this becomes visible. Markets don't need massive oversupply to weaken. They only need listings to appear faster than qualified buyers can absorb them. Homes sit longer. Incentives replace bidding wars. Price reductions begin to cluster, not as panic, but as pattern. Once buyers realize they have options, urgency disappears. That's when psychology flips. During booms, buyers fear missing out. During slowdowns, they fear being stuck. That single shift changes everything. People stop asking how fast they need to act and start asking how safe it is to wait. When waiting feels rational, momentum dies. Sellers often lag this reality. Many anchor to peak-era prices, expecting patience to restore leverage. But holding costs don't pause. Taxes, insurance, utilities, and maintenance continue regardless of market sentiment. The longer a home sits, the more expensive resistance becomes. This is why national averages are misleading. They smooth over stress instead of revealing it. One city can stall while another still sells, and the average pretends nothing changed. But housing is lived locally, not nationally. The real signal isn't price headlines, it's time. Time on market. Time between reductions. Time buyers are willing to wait. Once you understand this framework, markets stop feeling confusing. You don't need predictions, you watch behavior, and behavior always moves before prices do. If you want to recognize risk before headlines do, hit the bell now. From here on, you'll see this pattern play out city by city. Nothing looks broken yet in these markets, and that's exactly why they matter. Homes are still selling, people are still moving. Coffee shops are busy, trains are full, and open houses haven't disappeared. But underneath that surface normalcy, demand has changed shape. Buyers haven't vanished, they've slowed. And once buyers slow, leverage starts to move without asking for permission. Number 10 is Bayonne and Union City, the condo corridors that once felt untouchable. On paper, the pitch still works. Direct access to Manhattan, transit density, skyline views that sell themselves. But in 2025, the ledger has gotten louder than the view. HOA dues are higher than buyers expected. Insurance premiums for mid- and high-rise buildings have reset upward. Reserve studies are forcing associations to confront deferred maintenance, and special assessments are no longer hypothetical. Buyers are reading board minutes now. They're underwriting risk, not just admiring finishes. As a result, mid-tier units sit longer, price cuts cluster, and sellers are offering concessions just to restart conversations. This isn't collapse, it's friction. And friction spreads quietly across entire buildings. Number 9 is Toms River and Brick, the shore-adjacent suburbs that boomed on lifestyle momentum. The promise was simple: space, water access, and a softer pace than North Jersey. That promise hasn't disappeared, but the math has changed. Insurance repricing for wind and flood risk has pushed true monthly costs higher, especially for older homes with aging roofs, HVAC systems, and electrical. Buyers still tour, but inspections have teeth again. Credits replace waived contingencies. Deals fall apart over numbers that didn't matter 3 years ago. Investors who relied on seasonal or short-term rental math are less aggressive, and some are stepping back entirely. Listings don't crash here, they linger. And every lingering listing teaches the next buyer to wait. Number 8 is Vineland and Millville, where the slowdown reveals how fragile affordability can be when wages lag costs. These markets attracted attention during the boom because they looked cheap relative to the rest of the state. But cheap is not the same as affordable. Utilities, taxes, and insurance rose anyway, while incomes didn't keep pace. Cash flow investors who once absorbed inventory are now selective, if not exiting. Subdivision homes from the 1990s and early 2000s sit unless priced with honest repair math baked in. Days on market stretch just enough to change buyer behavior. Negotiation returns. Credits become normal. Price reductions stop feeling exceptional. What ties these three markets together isn't fear, it's hesitation. Sellers still remember how fast homes sold. Buyers are living in today's payment reality. That gap creates tension. Homes don't disappear, but they don't move with confidence either. They pause. And every pause reinforces patience across the market. This is the early fracture phase. Not dramatic. Not loud. But once buyers learn they don't need to rush, urgency doesn't come back easily. Stay with us. The pressure only builds from here. This is the point where the slowdown stops being subtle. You don't need spreadsheets or insider data to feel it anymore. You can see it in the listings, hear it in agent conversations, and sense it in how buyers behave. When urgency disappears at scale, markets don't bounce back quickly. They grind. Slowly. Relentlessly. And that grind shows up first in places that were supposed to feel stable. Number 7 is New Brunswick and Edison. For years, these areas leaned on university energy, healthcare employment, and commuter convenience to justify rising prices. That foundation still exists, but the housing market is no longer floating above the math. HOA-heavy townhome and condo communities are where the strain shows up fastest. Insurance premiums reset higher. Reserve studies recommend larger contributions. Older associations face elevator, roof, siding, and parking structure work that can't be deferred. Buyers aren't skimming listings anymore. They're reading HOA minutes, asking about assessments, and modeling dues 5 years forward. Pendings soften in the mid-tier, while only the cleanest, lowest dues units move smoothly. Sellers respond with rate buydowns and credits, but days on market stretch anyway, because the decision now hinges on the full monthly, not the list price. Number 6 is Jersey City, specifically the non-trophy mid-rise and mid-stack tiers. The skyline still sells the dream, but the payment tells the truth. Insurance costs are up. HOA dues are rising to rebuild reserves. Special assessments tied to facade work, boilers, and life safety upgrades are becoming common discussion points. Investors who stretched for rent growth during the boom are less aggressive or quietly testing exits. In resale lanes, the signals repeat. Second-week price improvements, seller paid points, concessions to cover parking or amenity fees. Units still sell, but not quickly and not without negotiation. Absorption slows in buildings where dues push the monthly beyond commuter comfort. Buyers who wait are rewarded with leverage. Sellers who anchor to 2022 comps lose momentum fast. Number 5 is Cherry Hill and Voorhees. These suburbs still attract families for schools, shopping, and access to Philadelphia, but the market is now ruled by carrying costs. Many homes built between the 1960s and 1990s need roofs, HVAC, windows, or electrical updates. Insurance and utilities climb anyway. Add property taxes and HOA dues in townhome pockets, and the all-in payment crosses a psychological line for many buyers. The result is predictable. Days on market push past 30, then 45. Listings relaunch after optimistic pricing fails. Negotiated credits become standard. Buyers who slow down win by structuring deals around repairs and permanent rate buydowns. Sellers who resist realism end up chasing the market with reductions that cost more time than they save. What connects these three markets is visibility. Inventory stacks. Price cuts normalize. Incentives stop being a surprise. Investors stop absorbing excess supply. Buyers wait because waiting feels rational. That reversal is powerful. During the boom, hesitation felt dangerous. Now, urgency does. This is where fear changes shape. It's no longer about missing out. It's about being stuck. Stuck with a payment that doesn't work. Stuck in a listing that won't move. Stuck watching nearby homes adjust downward while you hold the same price. Social proof flips. Buyers talk. They notice the same listings sitting. They hear about concessions. Waiting becomes the smart move. Markets in this phase don't snap back. They compress through time. If this is changing how you see housing, subscribe now. The signals only get clearer from here. This is where the conversation stops being forgiving. Up to this point, you could argue timing, sentiment, or temporary hesitation. In these markets, that excuse runs out. What's pressuring them isn't just buyer mood or interest rates. It's constraint. Insurance doesn't negotiate. Infrastructure doesn't pause. And when multiple costs rise together, belief stops mattering. Number 4 is Atlantic City and Brigantine. The postcard still works. The beach still draws attention, but housing doesn't run on scenery. It runs on numbers. In these shore markets, insurance has become the dominant variable. Wind and flood premiums reset higher. Deductibles climb, and HOA reserve requirements tighten as associations face roofs, facades, and mechanical systems exposed to salt and storms. Cash flow swings wildly with tourism seasonality, and that volatility is now priced into buyer behavior. Mid-tier condos and non-prime buildings sit longer, absorbing repeated reductions. Turnkey, low-dues units still move, but anything with assessment chatter or aging systems stalls fast. Buyers aren't panicking. They're underwriting like accountants. Sellers who disclose upcoming work and price accordingly still transact. Those who don't discover that charm doesn't offset uncertainty. Number 3 is Jersey City's non-trophy high-rise tiers. The brand remains powerful, but structure is unforgiving. Waterfront flagships near prime path access hold up best. Everywhere else, the math tightens. Concierge staffing, amenity maintenance, insurance renewals, and capital projects stack into HOA budgets that no longer feel abstract. Buyers slow down and underwrite aggressively. Reserve studies, insurance binders, boiler replacements, and life safety upgrades move from footnotes to deal breakers. Days on market climb in specific stacks, not across the board, which is how structural stress hides at first. Investors who depended on rent growth now face capped upside and rising costs, widening the gap between ask and offer. The leverage belongs to buyers willing to wait for the second reduction and negotiate from the monthly, not the view. Number 2 is Newark. Specifically select non-prime wards. Revitalization is real, but carrying costs are gatekeepers. Property taxes, insurance, and association dues push the all-in payment beyond what many local incomes can support. Older mid-rise stock faces looming mechanical, envelope, and electrical work that lenders and appraisers scrutinize closely. Deals wobble when renovation scope isn't clear. Price cuts cluster in mid-tier resales outside transit prime blocks. Buyers negotiate with precision now, asking for credits, permanent rate buydowns, and targeted repairs tied to underwriting realities. Sellers who price to peak-era comps wait. Sellers who lead with transparency and incentives, still close, just slower, and with thinner margins. What unites these markets is permanence. You can refinance a rate. You can wait out sentiment. You cannot refinance insurance instability, climate exposure, or aging infrastructure. These pressures don't reverse quickly, and they don't care how strong the brand sounds. This is where housing decisions stop being about optimism and start being about resilience. The question isn't whether these places remain desirable. It's whether the systems supporting ownership still have margin left. If you're buying, this is where patience turns into power. If you're selling, this is where realism preserves control. And if you want to understand risk before it becomes obvious, hit the bell. Structural pressure doesn't explode, it grinds, and time gets expensive when it does. This is where all the threads finally tie together and the pattern completes itself. Not with drama, not with a headline, but with clarity. Number 1 is Hoboken, and what makes Hoboken the clearest warning isn't that it looks weak on the surface. It's that it still looks strong, while the structure underneath is quietly failing the stress test. Hoboken has everything buyers are told to chase. Direct path access, walkable blocks, waterfront views, restaurants packed every weekend. For years, that brand power masked risk. People believed demand would always outrun price. That proximity alone guaranteed liquidity. In 2025, the ledger is finally louder than the lifestyle. Jumbo-leaning prices now collide with rising HOA dues, sharply higher insurance premiums, and reserve rebuilds tied to elevators, facades, roofs, and life safety systems that can't be deferred anymore. Each cost alone feels manageable. Together, they push the true monthly past comfort, even for strong dual-income households. You can see it in the behavior. Mid-stack units linger. Second-week price improvements appear where weekend bidding once lived. Sellers offer prepaid, HOA, closing credits, and permanent rate buydowns not as bonuses, but as lifelines to keep deals together. Pendings slip outside trophy lines near ferry access or prime path corridors. Days on market trend up specifically in buildings where assessment chatter exists, which is how structural stress reveals itself. Selectively, not universally. Oversupply adds pressure in a way most people miss. Hoboken doesn't need a building boom to weaken. It only needs too many similar units competing at the same price tier. When one seller blinks, the entire stack reprices. Liquidity evaporates fastest in markets built on sameness, because buyers always choose the best deal among identical options. Investors who planned clean exits now face widening spreads and fewer aggressive offers. Insurance shocks and rising dues turn hesitation into withdrawal. Weekend user demand seals it, because local wages were never meant to support peak pricing without leverage and emotion. This is why Hoboken matters. Every mechanism we discussed earlier converges here at once. Oversupply feeds price cuts. Price cuts spook leveraged owners. Investor exits stack inventory. Insurance and HOA costs raise the monthly. Buyers step back. None of this required panic. It only required imbalance. This could have been avoided with restraint, with pricing grounded in incomes, with realistic reserve planning, with respect for carrying costs. Instead, belief did the heavy lifting, until it couldn't. Hoboken isn't collapsing, it's recalibrating, and recalibration is painful for anyone who bought expecting speed to be permanent. This is the warning, not because Hoboken is unique, but because it isn't. The same setup exists elsewhere, just less concentrated. Paying attention here gives you a preview of what happens when structure finally overrides story. Subscribe and hit the bell, because this won't be the last market to break this way. And the people who adapt early don't absorb losses. They negotiate from strength. This is where we zoom out and turn observation into advantage. What New Jersey is showing you right now isn't a local anomaly or a temporary pause. It's a clean, early snapshot of how the 2026 housing cycle is actually behaving across the country. The biggest mistake people make at this stage is trusting averages. National numbers smooth friction instead of revealing it. They hide stalled cities behind stronger ones and convince people that nothing's wrong yet. But housing doesn't break nationally first. It breaks locally, quietly, and unevenly. By the time the averages confirm it, the outcomes are already locked in. The real shift in this cycle is leverage, and leverage now belongs to patience. In the last boom, waiting felt dangerous. You waited and prices ran away. In this market, waiting reveals truth. Listings sit, reductions repeat, incentives appear. Sellers show you where the pain is through behavior, not words. Patience isn't indecision anymore, it's intelligence. It lets you see which prices are real and which were held up by momentum that no longer exists. Pricing realism has become the dividing line. Sellers who adjust early preserve options. Sellers who cling to peak-era expectations don't protect value, they trap it. Every extra month on market adds carrying costs and erodes negotiating power. The market doesn't argue. It just works around resistance. Buyers notice lingering listings and assume risk, not opportunity. That psychological shift is subtle, but once it happens, it doesn't reverse quickly. For buyers, this is a mindset upgrade. You're no longer competing against crowds. You're negotiating against time. The strongest position isn't chasing the first price cut. It's understanding the full monthly, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, HOA, utilities, assessments, and deciding what actually makes sense for your life. The goal isn't to catch the exact bottom. It's to avoid becoming the liquidity someone else needs to escape. For sellers, the emotional adjustment is harder. The market is no longer lifting you. You're carrying the asset yourself now. That doesn't mean selling is wrong. It means strategy matters more than belief. Know who your real buyer is. Know what they can qualify for. Know how much competition you have. Pricing realistically isn't surrender. It's control. For investors, New Jersey delivers a hard lesson. Popularity doesn't reduce risk. It concentrates it. Appreciation-first strategies fail fastest when leverage, insurance, and sentiment turn together. Cash flow, replacement demand, and exit liquidity matter again. If those don't pencil cleanly, patience isn't conservative, it's protective. The most important shift is identity. You're no longer a passive consumer of housing narratives. You're an observer. You watch days on market. You notice incentives. You listen to silence where urgency used to be. You don't need predictions when behavior tells the story first. That awareness is the edge most people never realize they're allowed to have. Use this lens beyond New Jersey. Apply it to your own city. Are listings stacking? Are buyers hesitating? Are sellers adjusting or resisting? Those answers matter more than any headline. Drop what you're seeing in the comments: zip codes, days on market, price cuts, HOA or insurance shocks. Collective observation sharpens clarity. Subscribe and hit the bell because early clarity is the advantage most people miss. And once you see the cycle clearly, you stop reacting late and start choosing from strength.